レスキーの皆様、本日はビジネス界、政界、そして学会から多くの優れた方々をお迎えしております。シニアアドバイザーとして、京都哲学研究所への皆様の貴重なご支援に対し、個別ではなく皆様全員に心より感謝申し上げます。この新しく有序な研究所の事実的かつ戦略的な発展に貢献できることは私にとって大変光栄です。澤田淳様、出口康夫教授、理事の皆様、そしてこの素晴らしい会合企画、運営してくださったチームの皆様に心からお祝い申し上げます。日本、そして日本の友人、同僚の皆様は、私の人生において特別な位置を占めています。皆様のおもてなし、友情、そしてご支援は、哲学者、アドバイザー、そして創業者としての私の活動に永続的な影響を与えてきました。本日は、このことに対し深い感謝の意を表したいと思います。すでにリオ会長のお言葉を拝聴いたしましたが、その後に続いて基調講演をさせていただくことを大変光栄に存じます。私はまだ日本語を勉強中ですので、今日の講演は英語で行います。しかし、日本語の奥深さと予言力には深く心を打たれており、今後出版予定の著書によってその美しさをさらに探求し、この偉大な国に少しでも貢献できればと願っております。So, now for English. It's a privilege to speak to you at this first Kyoto conference of the Kyoto Institute of Philosophy, and let me also expand my warm-hearted thanks to our American friends who started supporting us, in particular Robert Thompson, who's with us today to organize this first major event and to set up this institute. Today I would like to offer a vision, a way to think about our current crises, about artificial intelligence in particular, and about the possibility of moral progress, and even, as you will see, moral innovation in the 21st century. So I'm a relentless optimist, as you will see. So we live, arguably, in an age of what I would like to call nested crises. Climate change, the crisis of liberal democracy, rising geopolitical tension, and worse, the disruptive power of artificial intelligence, bioengineering, and other dimensions of scientific progress, all these challenges overlap and feed into each other. They do not form, as many think, a single unified problem. So I do not think that there's a single thing called the holy crisis, but rather a tangled network of risks and opportunities. The crisis you see first often depends on where you stand. From the perspective of AI, and that's the one I'm going to adopt for the rest of my talk, we see technology shaping our economies, our politics, our wars, even our conception of what it means to be human. From the perspective of democracy, we see polarization and disinformation accelerated by the very same technologies. And of course, you might as well adopt the perspective of climate change. And then you will see how all of these phenomena that I have been characterizing also depend on the fact that we are, if we are lucky, already at half of the chessboard the ambassador mentioned earlier. Your geography also matters. Japan today faces, fortunately, no food crisis, but political scandals over rice prices remind us how fragile stability can be even in Japan. The point is simple. We live in conditions of profound complexity. And that complexity generates what I would like to call the paradox of innovation. Here's the paradox. As technological progress accelerates, it creates new opportunities. That's why we welcome it. But at the same time, new forms of social and moral regression as unintended side effects. There are different things you can do with drones. But also think of the atom bomb, whose 80th anniversary Japan commemorates this year. I had the honor of speaking about this at a business forum in Hiroshima. A triumph of science, yet a moral catastrophe. Or think of artificial intelligence, and I do not dare compare the two, already used to spread disinformation and undermine democracy. This paradox deepens our crises. It also reveals something, that solving them will require not just more innovation, more potential weapons, but a different kind of innovation, an innovation I would like to call deep innovation. All of this is something I've learned here in Japan, where the term deep, or kubukai, plays a very important role. My Tokyo friends have always told me Kyoto is deep, okubukai, and I begin to understand what this means, scratching the surface. Deep innovation means three things. It is a combination of, one, interdisciplinary cooperation between humanities, sciences, and engineering. So across the board of what we have assembled at the modern research university, one of those German inventions that the Americans took from us and perfected in a certain way. So let's see where that's going to go. Second, transcultural cooperation between scholars, policymakers, industry, the arts, and even religions, paradigmatically represented and realized at this venue. And third, and equally importantly, transcultural cooperation across regions and traditions. The Kyoto Institute of Philosophy embodies this approach like no other place, I think, so far. And I propose that what we need are moral innovation labs, places where ethics, technology, and culture work together to address the moral challenges of our time from within the sectors. So my model is one where the humanities feed into business in such a way that we can develop concrete business cases based on the humanities, but there's also a feedback loop. Because I think of business's relationship to the humanities and ethics in particular, in analogy to the relationship between a particle accelerator and physics. So theoretical physics by itself, while wonderful and mathematically beautiful, wouldn't give you anything if we didn't have particle accelerators, and there's a significant Swiss presence here, so I hope that Swiss business can also serve as a particle accelerator for ethics. So, why moral? Why am I speaking about moral here? Because technological revolution always forces us to rethink our values. The Chinese philosopher Mengzi, writing in the 4th century BC, gave a very simple example. That's a famous quote from Mengzi, not from Peter Singer, who also has this idea, but it's a little older than Peter Singer even. So here's the quote from Mengzi. If someone suddenly sees a child about to fall into a well, they instinctively feel alarm and compassion, not for reward, not for fame, but out of human benevolence. The president of Kyoto University also mentioned earlier that there are certainly deep evolutionary roots for this fact that Mengzi articulated in the 4th century BC. So some moral facts are, in that sense, obvious. You ought to save the child. If you generalize this, it has certain consequences that are easily violated, such as do not shoot rockets at childcare facilities. That's, I think, the same problem. So while some moral facts are obvious, it's very simple to violate them, unfortunately. But AI, which will be the focus of today, raises even harder questions. How should we design chatbots that shape human emotions? How should we use AI in warfare, or better, peacemaking, in education, in care for the elderly, and so forth? These questions are not easily answered by just referring to obvious moral facts, otherwise there will be no need for us to convene. For these questions, then, we need systematic ethical reflection combined with the analytical power of AI itself. AI systems are not neutral. They reflect the data and therefore the values of the societies that build them. Even on the mathematical level, if you look at the relevant research papers by Google, etc., about, say, the transformer technology that is currently conquering the world, you will understand that bias is constitutively built into the system. It's just a feature of neural networks. It's just a mathematical property that the function that the next artificial neuron takes over from the prior neuron does not start at the 0 point of the coordinate system. That's the mathematical idea. So any function of the form x plus b, where b is a constant and not a variable, is called a bias. So that's just a short footnote. I call systems that I think we ought to develop that would allow us to, for the first time in human history, detect actual value patterns in large-scale human behavior, ethical intelligences. And I learned just yesterday that also at the Institute for Future Societies at your university, President Minato are building systems of this form. And I've constructed one myself, which you see there, the Alpha Buddha, with reference to my Japanese friends. So what the EI systems do, think of them as magical mirrors. They analyze vast cultural data to reveal how humans actually think, feel, and judge. So AI systems, we heard that, are analogy and pattern detection systems. Given that value judgments in human societies are patterns, therefore, very simple argument, it is not only possible, but I will argue morally required, that we build systems which are capable of detecting values in large data sets, so that for the first time we have the opportunity to understand the human being thanks to AI. Once again, I'm a relentless optimist. Which means that ethical intelligences help us see moral blind spots, cultural differences where they really are, and areas of potential moral progress. My teams are building precisely such systems like the Alpha Buddha. Trained on transcultural ethics and behavioral data, these systems aim not to replace human judgment, but to enhance it, helping policymakers, companies, and communities design institutions that, by design, align with human values. In a way, that's a Japanese approach, go hybrid. So I think, short recommendation to the Japanese car industry, going hybrid was the smart move. We have a problem with that in Germany. We don't like hybrid, so there's something we can learn from you. Just as driver monitoring systems will soon be mandatory in every EU car to prevent accidents, ethical intelligences could guide our social, political, and economic decision-making towards moral improvement and thus shape moral progress. But what is that? So what do I mean by moral progress? So here's roughly my definition. It is the large-scale recognition of moral truths that were previously ignored or denied. So history shows moral progress when societies, for instance, these are the typical philosophers' examples, there are indefinitely many more, but in philosophy we usually mention the abolition of slavery, the expansion of human rights, the protection of the environment, or the introduction of the female vote in some European countries later than in others. Some of us know which they are. But here's some good news. Research in economics by scholars like Acemoglu, Johnson, and Robinson, who won also a very important Nobel Prize in 24, shows that doing good, in their case institutional stability, is not only morally right, but economically beneficial in the long run. As I like to put it, so I'm quoting myself from this book on ethical capitalism that I specifically wrote first for Japanese industry after wonderful and insightful conversations with Keidan Ren. The business of business is doing good and profiting from it. You can have both, the famous cake and eat it, in particular in the digital era where the cake is digital. So this is not wishful thinking. It's an emerging empirical fact about how ethics and economics intertwine in the long run. There's great research also at Stanford and elsewhere in the Said Business School in Oxford on these kinds of topics, and I saw Edward Freeman here who has been working on these kinds of things for a long time. So, to approach my conclusion from crisis to opportunity. To return to my starting point, the wicked structure of nested crises. The Japanese word for crisis famously is Kiki. The Chinese use similar characters, though simplified because of the Maoist revolution. It combines two characters, one for danger, ki, and one for opportunity, ki. So the nice thing about Japanese is that it's just ki. Crises force choices. They expose risks, but they also open path to renewals. The nested crises of our time, climate, governance, democracy, AI, and so forth, could lead to disaster. But if we build moral innovation labs powered by ethical intelligences and grounded in serious transcultural cooperation, we can turn crisis into opportunity. As the philosopher Hans-Georg Gadamer said in his book Truth and Method and in a famous interview to Der Spiegel, the principle of ethics is the other could be right, which is not to say the other is right, it's just to say the other could be right. Consider that. And this brings in not only philosophy, but the humanities at large. By listening across cultures, disciplines, and technologies, we gain the objectivity of what historian of science Lauren Deston calls a view from everywhere. So this is, according to Lauren Deston, the function of the humanities. You look at a problem from everywhere, from all cultures, and thereby identify value. So how do we get value into view? And one proposal, the one that I'm recommending, is this idea, the view from everywhere. It's not the view from nowhere, but precisely from everywhere. So take as many positions as possible. This, I believe, then, is the path forward. A global network of moral innovation labs like KIP, AI systems designed not just for efficiency or mere profit, but for moral insight, and a commitment to seeing crises as chances for human co-becoming. To quote another of our Japanese colleagues, Takahiro Nakajima, with whom I have also been working, co-becoming is kyosei in Japanese and gongsheng in Chinese, and it's the translation of symbiosis. So coming back to some of the life science and biology topics of yesterday's opening panel and of some of the remarks we heard today. And of course, but this is obvious, the return, which is why I didn't give Yasuo a photo here, but we saw him speak in person. So we began with nested crisis and we end with a call to build the institutions, the technologies, and the collaborations that allow us to co-create moral progress in the age of AI. Given that we can build such systems, it is a moral fact that we ought to do. Thank you.